I feel I will have a more powerful impact if I focus the beam, so to speak. And not only that, it'll be way easier to get people here in my sweet studio. We're still gonna do some virtual stuff, but hey, I want you to come see me. So that's why the name change. That's why we are no longer fueled by spite. It ran its course, it served its purpose, and I loved every minute of it. But there are really cool people out there who don't want to be on fueled by spite. There are people out there with amazing stories who aren't spiteful, but they got grit, and we are chock full of that. To fuel by spite, being put out to stud, and to the new, the improved, the focused, the collaborative DFW Grit. Regardless of the title, you will still learn more here by accident than elsewhere by design. And that's because of the host, not because of what he calls his show. Welcome to DFW Grit. I'm Dr. James Taylor, and I'm your host, and this is more than just a podcast. We dive into the stories of the movers, the shakers, the small business owners, the entrepreneurs, right here in the DFW Metroplex. This is your home for authentic, real stories that prove what happens when you don't back down. Let's get to work. All right, who the hell is this? What is this? Hey, welcome back to the first episode of the new and improved, the rebranded, the re-edited, the reformatted DFW Grit. So, new name, who dis? Why did we change? What happened? What happened to spite? I like spite. You know what? I liked spite. I like spite too. But spite was made for me. And if it's not incredibly apparent right now, I am doing this for you. So let's talk about the name change. Let's talk about the pivot. Let's talk about the new graphics. Let's talk about why this happened. Not only why this happened, but for all intents and purposes, why this had to happen. Why did we have to change the name? Real easy. It's because there's a guest that we haven't had yet. And it wasn't changed for him, but he was the impetus for that change. Basically, so if you go back and you watch the first few episodes, I give you my definition of spite. And I am still spiteful as I sit before you, as my dulcet tones grace your ears. I'm still spiteful. Um, but it was, my definition of spite, the way that I view spite, is not is not world renowned, is not worldwide as much as I want it to be. I take spite as fuel. I look at spite as fuel. Spite is a way that I propel myself forward. I want to beat you. I want to do better than you. And for all intents and purposes, like that's in my mind, that's a compliment. If I want to beat you, that means you're ahead of me. That means you're better than me. You're doing something I'm not. You've accomplished something I haven't, and I want to do that thing. And that's how I viewed spite. That's still how I viewed spite. I'm going to do it because you've done it. Or I'm going to do it because you said I couldn't do it. That is another very powerful motivating factor for me. So that's where fueled by spite came from. But as time goes on, one of the great pieces of advice that I received in getting this whole production started, you've heard me mention his name before, Sumo. I know he loves it when people break the fourth wall and call him out on his greatness. But he goes, hey, interview your friends first, because then your interviews will come off as conversations, and it will be harder to see that you're a shitty interviewer. Great advice. And in so doing, when I reached out to my friends, because you are who you associate with, hey, I'm starting a podcast. It's called Fueled by Spite. Would you like to be on it? Absolutely, they said. They jumped at the opportunity to be on Fueled by Spite, hosted by Dr. James Taylor, because they knew James Taylor. They knew, some of them knew Jim Taylor. Some of them knew Taylor. They knew my outlook, my vision of spite. even without me having to say it. Like, hey, friend, I'm doing this thing. Would you like to accompany me? Yes, yes, I would. So that's why the first 50 episodes were super easy to get people to come on and tell their stories because they were my friends. They were people, they're my associates. They were people that I knew, and more importantly, from a scheduling standpoint, knew me. But as time went on, and I found more people who I wanted to have the opportunity to hear their stories, to hear their trials, their tribulations, the things that they've encountered, scheduling people became a little bit more difficult because I'd say, hey, I'm hosting a podcast. It's called Fueled by Spite. Would you like to be on it? And more people are like, I mean, yeah, maybe, but I'm not spiteful. No, but see, like, it's my definition of spite. It's not like the generally accepted definition of spite. It's my definition. And then I'd explain it to them, and then they would schedule. But then as time goes on, and I did not have necessarily the opportunity to explain my definition, or maybe a better way to put it, to explain my vision, then scheduling became more difficult and more difficult because they would see Fueled by Spite, and it was simply, stranger, Mr. Guy reaching out to me on a podcasting Facebook group. No, I'm not really spiteful. Now, you don't necessarily have to be spiteful. Do you want to win? And it's just like, why? How is this? Why the name change? I got tired of explaining myself. And this thing, I want being the podcast, I want to be able to stand alone. And if I have to keep propping it up with my definition, then it's not standing alone. This thing is going to be seen in print before it is heard, or at least in text. You're going to be scrolling through YouTube and you're going to see Fueled by Spite. You're going to scroll through Spotify, suggested listening, Fueled by Spite. I'm like, no, I'm not feeling spiteful. Let's scroll on past it. But what is the underlying milieu, if you will, in all this spitefulness, in all this success? I touched on it in a previous episode. Part of being a success is falling in love, in a sense, with the drudgery of building something great. Now, Fueled by Drudgery, also terrible name, so that didn't work. But there's a certain aspects of building building the life that you want to live, where it's not all sunshine and daisies, if you will, like my new cup, Taylor. There's things that come up that go on, that you just have to simply push through because it is part of the process. And yes, that could certainly be seen as drudgery. There could be fuel that gets you through that is generated from spite. But what is another word for that? And what is something that in my mind can be far more palatable to the people whose stories I want to share? Grit. So, today is the first episode of DFW Grit. Now, why DFW Grit? Because also, too, one of the honings in, if you will, that I want to do with this, like, this is absolutely positively 100% a way for people to get their victories out in the open, to share their struggles, their trials, and their tribulations. But also, no offense to anyone listening outside of the DFW area, man, I want to keep this thing close to home. I want to help the people who help me, right? So, I know we've got past episodes with Minnesota and Ireland and Florida. I don't know. We've got people from outside of DFW. We've got people that don't live here. And while, don't get me wrong, I love their stories. Go back and check out Mike Schatz's pig semen story. It's hilarious. If you don't know, go figure it out. But I wanna work in my backyard. I wanna work with the people who work with me. I wanna interview the person who runs the cafe that I go to, that I just went to for breakfast. Also, shout out to Blue Mound Cafe. It was delicious. But I want that. I feel I will have more a more powerful impact if I focus the beam, so to speak. And not only that, it'll be way easier to get people here in my sweet studio. We're still gonna do some virtual stuff, but hey, I want you to come see me. So that's why the name change. That's why we are no longer fueled by spite. It ran its course, it served its purpose, and I loved every minute of it. But there are really cool people out there who don't want to be on fueled by spite. There are people out there with amazing stories who aren't spiteful, but they got grit, and we are chock full of that. So keep in touch, keep tuned in. Everyone, raise a glass to, we won't say that fueled by spite isn't dead, because again, it is still fueled, it is still part of my fuel mixture. But it has been put out to passion. It has been put out to stud. There it is. To fuel by spite, being put out to stud. And to the new, the improved, the focused, the collaborative DFW Grit. Regardless of the title, you will still learn more here by accident than elsewhere by design. And that's because of the host, not because of what he calls his show. Before all this happened, you were either ignorant or you were uninformed. And right now, I guarantee you can no longer say that you're uninformed. So here's to Fueled by Spite. Thanks for what you did. Here's to DFW Grit. Thanks for all that you're going to do. Keep watching, like, share, follow, tell your friends, especially if they live in DFW here, because we want to get the word out. We want to get your word out right here on DFW Grit. You guys have a great rest of your day. Here's to 2025, kicking ass and taking names. Chock full of grit.